So, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 released in cinemas about a week ago, and even though that film was absolutely fantastic and incredible, I'm already thinking about the future. I want to talk about what's next for the Sonic franchise and talk about specifically those two post-credit scenes and what they mean for the future of not only the franchise, but for the next entry coming out now in 2026. Now, I'm not one for doing reviews, as I've mentioned previously, but my god, Sonic 3 was good. I absolutely loved it. Like, as a lifetime Sonic fan, I've been loving these films. And Sonic 3, for me, definitely the best one of the trilogy so far. It's just filled with so much fan service. It's so great. And I know fan service isn't everything, but as a fan, I was serviced. I absolutely loved everything to do with Shadow and his backstory, the way it all culminates in the Live and Learn sequence, which just hearing that song through cinema speakers was a euphoric experience. My partner was certainly very embarrassed to be sat next to me during that scene. I was just losing my mind. Just a fantastic film. Loved it. I've only seen it the once so far. I definitely want to see it again, and I will absolutely be buying the Blu-ray and hopefully a steelbook if it's nice. Just fantastic third entry, and the best one yet in my opinion. But just like the previous two films, there were two post-credit scenes. Well, the previous films didn't have two post-credit scenes, but they did have post-credit scenes. But Sonic 3 had two. We had a mid-credit sequence and we also had a post-credit sequence, which both hint towards the future of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. So let's dive into those. So I'll start off with the post-credit scene, the one that comes right at the very, very end, because for me, the more interesting one is the mid-title sequence. So for me, the post-credit scene showed the return of Shadow, which, as I mentioned in my little mini review there, loved Shadow. I thought Keanu was fantastic in the role, and he was brilliantly characterized, like on-point Shadow adaptation. Fantastic. So the fact that Shadow's coming back, great news, especially because in the film, you know, they kind of hint towards the idea that Shadow died in the final battle. I didn't fully believe that, so seeing him show up again didn't really surprise me. I think the more interesting question now is, what is Shadow's role actually going to be going forward? Because, yeah, he could appear in Sonic 4, and I'm sure he probably will, but I think his role in Sonic 4 is probably going to be a lot smaller, certainly not as much screen time as he had in Sonic 3. I just don't think that the story of the next film is going to be particularly, revolved around Shadow. And also, when you look at Shadow's, role within the games and his relationship with Sonic and the rest of his team, he's not typically a member of Team Sonic. He's not, the guy who's always there. It's not like Knuckles at the end of the last movie who, was evil, then turned good, and then joined the family. It's not like that with Shadow. He is still very much his own guy. He just sometimes ends up on the same side as Sonic, and they end up teaming up sometimes. So while Shadow may have a role in the next film, I think this post-credit scene might be hinting towards something else. I think that we could potentially be seeing a Shadow spin-off, which I'm not someone who's particularly keen on like spin-offs and all these different things, because for me personally, it's getting a little bit ridiculous at this point. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't excited for a Shadow spin-off, because he was so well done in this film that I want more of this version of Shadow. I want more with Keanu, whether that is a spin-off TV series like The Knuckles Show, which I know The Knuckles Show wasn't very good, but hopefully if they do a Shadow series, it would be a lot better than that. Or if Shadow gets his own movie, I would love that. If I had the preference, I would choose a Shadow movie over a Shadow TV series, just because I feel like these Sonic films, they do work better as films rather than a long-form TV series or even a 6-episode series. So getting a Shadow movie, I would love to see that, especially because this film does do a good job of kind of delving into Shadow's backstory, but there's so much more to Shadow that the movie doesn't touch on, and I think that they could take elements from Shadow the Hedgehog from 2005 and kind of go along that line, especially because, the director of this series, Jeff Fowler, he was on the development team of Shadow the Hedgehog. That's why he's so passionate about not only this franchise, but Shadow particularly as a character. So, if we get a Shadow spin-off and Jeff Fowler's involved and we can kind of do a adaptation of some sort. I mean, they'd have to change a lot of things from Shadow the Hedgehog 2005, but if we got that, that would be amazing. And as someone who kind of grew up in that era of Sonic, of, Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic 06, Sonic Unleashed, like that kind of era, I would love to see it personally. So the post-credit scene, it doesn't show a lot. It just confirms Shadow's still alive. But as I said, I think while his role in Sonic 4 may be small, I think we might be getting a lot more Shadow at some point down the line. But as I said, the post-credit scene was kind of exciting, but not as interesting as the mid-credit scene, which gave us the villain of our next film, that being Metal Sonic. Now, I have to say, completely selfishly, I'm quite proud of myself, the fact that I predicted this post-credit scene bang on. I said to a good friend of mine, Dan Finn, before the film started, I said, this film is going to end, the post-credit scene is going to have Metal Sonic and or Amy, and we got both in the same post-credit scene, so I'm pretty happy with that. And to be honest, my logic was that if this is the fourth Sonic movie that they're setting up, it makes sense that they would kind of go from the fourth game, that being Sonic CD, which introduced Amy and Metal Sonic, so it does kind of line up. But anyway, back to the scene itself, we see Sonic, he's done the race with Knuckles and Tails, and he's gone a little bit too far. He ends up in this forest, he's looking around, and he can hear things moving around, and all of a sudden he sees a metal robotic version of himself, but it turns out there's not just one of them, there's a whole army of them. And this is really cool, because I think Metal Sonic is definitely the logical next step to go to for the villain. You know, we've done Robotnik a few times, we've done Shadow now. I think it makes sense to kind of go in the Metal Sonic direction. Now, I guess the question now is, what is this version of Metal Sonic, you know, and this army of them, and where do they come from? Because I think what's important to note here is that, is Jim Carrey gonna come back for the next movie? Because he's come back for all three films. He clearly loves doing them. And while I think there's a very strong chance we will see Jim Carrey again in the next one, despite his ending in Sonic 3, I also think this might be time, and this might be a good opportunity for the Sonic franchise to step away from Robotnik, at least for this movie, and see if they can do it. Because I think Jim Carrey, he's such a big draw to these films, like people love them because of him, but they also need to realize, you know, can we make a movie without Jim Carrey, and will it be as successful? So it might be a bit of a risky experiment to do it without Jim Carrey, but I feel like introducing a character like Metal Sonic into it can test that. Now, obviously, they could bring Robotnik into it again and have Metal Sonic tied to Robotnik in some way, but I personally think they should just try and do something original here and see where they can go with that, just to see if it works. But I must say as well, the design of Metal Sonic is perfect. It looks bang on. You know, these films are brilliant at getting the designs of the characters perfect, and Metal Sonic is no different. He looks great. So I can't wait to see what they do with him. Can't wait to see, you know, this army and how Team Sonic are going to fight against them. And I, for one, I'm just excited for Sonic 4 on that basis alone. But that's not all. Also in that post-credit scene, we got the reveal of Amy. Now, as mentioned, Amy was also introduced in the same game as Metal Sonic, so it kind of makes sense that they would introduce these two characters together. She comes out of the darkness wearing a hood. She uses her Pico Pico hammer to take out a few of the Metal Sonic droids to save Sonic. Now, going into this, I'm kind of interested with Amy because Amy is not a particularly favourite character of mine from the Sonic franchise, you know, especially in the era I grew up in. Amy was always characterized as being really annoying, and, you know, all she did was pine after Sonic, and that was it. That was her character. They've done a little bit better in recent years in making Amy a bit more of her own character, but I think this is something that the movie really has to kind of narrow down on, is making Amy kind of her own character with her own sense of agency, and she isn't just Sonic's girlfriend who, you know, he doesn't really care about that much, but she's obsessed with him. It's just not a great look for that character, especially because this is the first major female character being introduced into this franchise. Also, we've had the female human characters, but on the actual, like, Sonic character side, we've not had any, really. So Amy is a big deal coming into this, and I think, you know, in terms of capturing that female audience, the young female audience, they need to have a strong, compelling character with Amy, and that is the first important step. Now, what role will she play within the film? I think her role might be similar to what they sort of did with Tails in the second film, where they kind of introduced them into the film and they are there playing a supporting role, not necessarily like front and center. The movie's not going to be about Amy necessarily, I don't think, but she's going to be a, you know, big player within the team. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it, because Amy doesn't really have much of a story that you can adapt necessarily. She is kind of just a member of the team in that sense. Obviously, she does have her own stories, and you can do things with Amy, but in terms of like focusing a whole movie around her, I just don't think there's enough material with Amy to really do that, like they did with Shadow in Sonic 3. I just don't think that's really possible. So putting her in that supporting role, I think will work really well. And again, so long as she is a independent, strong character on her own, I think they'll be on a good track with her. And I think based on this post-credit scene, the fact that she comes out of the dark to save Sonic on her own, I think is already a good step. I think they're already ahead of me on that because, again, they're really good at making these movies and making these characters compelling already, so I'm glad they're already ahead of me on there. Now, casting is also obviously a huge thing. Like, we always are really excited to find out who's going to play these characters. The casting of Shadow was, like, such a huge thing. In terms of Amy, it could be anybody. Like, they could go for a big name. They could go down the route of just having perhaps the actress who plays her in the games player, like they have with Tails. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, I personally don't have like any casting choices off the top of my head for Amy. If you have any of your own, make sure you let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear some casting choices. But I do think they will probably go for a big-ish name. Like, I have seen like Scarlett Johansson thrown around, which, I mean, to be fair, she is very good with franchise work. She recently did a voice work in Transformers 1, also for Paramount, so there is that kind of synergy there. So I could see that happening, but there's lots of other choices that could be great for it, so let me know if you have any castings for Amy in the comments down below. But overall, am I excited for Sonic 4? I mean, I don't even need to answer that. Of course I am. Like, it's so obvious. We got the release date. It's now coming out, I believe, in March of 2026. And 2026 is a busy year. Like, there's a lot coming out in 2026. Lots of really exciting stuff from big franchises that we love, directors that we love. Like, it's a big, big year. But Sonic 3, or Sonic 4, I should say, is already standing out to me as easily one of my most anticipated of the year. I don't know if I'm going to go out on a limb and say it is my most anticipated of that year so far, but it's going to be on that list. I just love this franchise so much. It's just gotten better and better with each installment, and given what they've set up here for Sonic 4, I'm so excited to see it. I really, really am, and I'm excited about the future of the franchise as a whole. I really hope that we get just more and more of these movies, because it's a franchise that's so near and dear to my heart. Not only these films, but the games. I grew up with them, so seeing such a successful and really well-loved movie franchise be created out of these games, it brings me so much joy. Like, I kind of wish I had these movies when I was a kid, because I would have been all over them. But even as an adult, like, just watching these films, I'm having a great time. It's the inner kid inside of me coming out when I watch these films. I absolutely loved it. But what I want to know from you guys is, what do you think of these post-credit scenes? Are you excited for Sonic 4? Make sure to let me know all your theories and thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.